Welcome to this story of a warrior told in his own words. What he has to say is for all of us to hear, but especially those of us who have never been in combat. Karl Marlantes, a small-town boy from Oregon, the son of a soldier, a graduate of Yale, landed in Vietnam in October 1968 and was placed in charge of 1st Platoon, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 4th Marine Regiment. 1 year later, he came home with 2 Purple Hearts, the Navy Cross, the Bronze Star, 10 Air Medals, and memories that screamed at him. He finished his degree in philosophy at Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship and spent the next 30 years in business, all the while wrestling with the demons that came home with him. Finally, in the late 90s, he asked the Veterans Administration for help and began treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. 2 years ago, he published a novel. He had been working on it ever since he came home from Vietnam, Matterhorn, the story of a young second lieutenant leading a rifle platoon of 40 Marines on a remote jungle hill. Critics called it a powerhouse, tense, brutal, honest, unforgettable, moving, and intense. Karl Marlantes has now written a second book, a nonfiction memoir and meditation on what it is like to go to war. Read it, and you will be closer than you can imagine to the mind and heart of the warrior in battle and after. America has been at war for over a decade now. 2 million Americans have served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and most of us here at home still don't get it. Karl Marlantes and his book will help immeasurably. Karl Marlantes, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I haven't been sure about how to start this interview. I've never been to war. I've never looked a man in the eye who was trying to kill me and killed him before he could. I'm not even sure that I can ask a question that doesn't strike you as banal against your experience. I guess what I'm saying is that there's this divide between the warrior and the rest of us, and that divide can't really be crossed, can it?
No, but I think that what has to change is this inhibition that we all feel about asking. You come back and there is this code of silence, and both the, I call them civilian and the veteran, have it. And it gets in the way, and it's all done out of trying to be kind. But it's like, well, I don't want to say something that upsets him, or I don't want to. And the fact of the matter is, if someone would genuinely ask, well, can you talk about it? I think most guys would be delighted, And sure, there are those who are going to say, I don't want to talk about it, the classic, and there are going to be those. So then you wait a year or two and ask him again. And believe me, at some point, they're going to want to talk about it. I mean, it's a horrendous experience that people just need to talk about, to connect. And there is this divide. Our culture reinforces it.
So I'll start with this. When you have killed for the rest of us, are you ever to feel that you are one of us again?
That's a great question. There is a sense of alienation that I think most veterans deal with. And it is because you have done something that most people think is horrific. And the fact of the matter is, if you were a proud soldier or Marine, you felt good about it. And then you say, maybe I should feel bad that I feel good about this. And so you get these moral reverberations going around in your head that you're sure that no one else is going to understand. I think that that's probably not true. I think people with a certain amount of wisdom can certainly try to understand it, but you do have a sense of alienation. I think it's one of the issues of trying to reintegrate.
Talk a little bit about that, further about that estrangement. Is it guilt? What is it?
Well, it's hard to say that it's guilt because I've killed people, more than one, and I feel sadness about it, a great deal of sadness. That's different than guilt. Oh, yeah. But I think that it's if someone's going to talk about it, you have the fear that they won't understand what you're saying and that they'll judge you badly. And so why open yourself up to that kind of a wound? Just it's just better to just keep it quiet, because if they do misunderstand what you're really trying to say, how you really felt when you were 19 and pulled the trigger, and they don't get it, then you're in this morass, and then maybe you'll lose a friend, and maybe the girl won't like you. And I mean, there's all these things that, I mean, when you come back from war, most people, like Vietnam veterans, were 19 and 20 years old. And so, you're worried about, whether your hair looks right at that age. So,
Were you able to tell your friends why you were no longer like them?
No, I didn't talk about it. It was just, that was the code. And it was, again, that war was highly politicized. We were just a little bit afraid, to, at least I was, to come out, because a lot of my friends were virulently against that war. And how would they judge me, if I let them know?
You write in What It's Like to Go to War that the violence of combat assaults psyches, confuses ethics, and tests souls. Mm-hmm. This is the result not only of the violence you suffer, but the violence you inflict?
Absolutely. Yes, you have to take that into consideration. I mean, we are raised in a Judeo-Christian culture. I mean, thou shalt not kill, even for the atheists in our culture, is a tenet you just do not violate unless you're, crazy or a sociopath or something. And so all your young life, that's drilled into your head. And then suddenly, you're 18 or 19 and they're saying, go get them and kill for your country. And then you do that, and then you come back. And then it's like, well, thou shalt not kill again. Well, believe me, that is a difficult thing to deal with. And I think what's even more difficult is that the only being that should actually take life is the one that gives life, and that's God, or the gods. And you take a young man and you put him in the role of a god, where he is asked to take a life. That's something that no 19-year-old is able to handle. I mean, that's, without really having to stretch. And so that's a big part of this, when you say, is the infliction of death or pain on others part of it? Absolutely, because you've stepped into a role that ordinary people never touch.
You write in here, the lack of mature judgment is what makes young men, especially teenagers, ideal weapons of the state.
Yes, absolutely. When you're 18 or 19 years old, you've had kids, I have kids, you can't get them to put a raincoat on when they go out in the rain, because they're not thinking that way. They don't, apparently we've got the brain science today that the part of the brain that does judgment and foresight is not even developed until you're at least 21. And so you have these young people who have got the incredible bodies of 19-year-olds, the stamina, the speed, all of that, and they don't hesitate to do what you ask of them. Can you imagine a platoon of Marines who are 35? Oh, wait a second, Lieutenant, let's think about this. Maybe we should have the Air Force come in and hit them for a couple of days before we do this. The 19-year-old is just, you're going to say, take the hill, they're going to do it. That is exactly right.
What makes an effective killer in combat?
First of all, competence with weapons. He can shoot straight. He can make sure that his weapon works. The second one I think is very important is the ability to do ultimate teamwork. You lose your sense of being an individual. You are part of, I can only go back to the hunting group, that feeling of that it's we, not me, and that you are willing to sacrifice your me, both as a physical body and as an individual, to make sure that the we of the unit gets through this okay.